Yes, look at that. All three of these beautiful books are available to you at the Silver Unicorn Bookstore in Acton, Massachusetts. We are open and we're taking 7 guests at a time, and we want you to be one of those 7. So come on in. Or they're at silverunicornbooks.com. And if you're far away and you don't want to use those 2 things, which would make us sad, but it's okay, just make sure that you purchase these 3 books at an independent bookstore near you. Emphasis on independent bookstore. And I'm rambling, so I'm going to disappear. I will be back. Rebecca, congratulations. Kaela, Sam, it's so lovely to meet you. Thank you to all 3 of you for being with us this evening. This is going to be so much fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kira. Yes. Yeah, thank you. Thank you to the Silver Unicorn for hosting us and for my co-panelists for joining me today from afar. You know, one of the silver linings of this Zoom world we live in is that we can connect with, you know, authors and bookstores across the country. So they're joining us from Utah and California, which is wonderful. And yeah, thanks to Silver Unicorn for supporting not just local authors and readers like myself, but those further afield like Kaela and Sam. So like Kira mentioned, I host the middle grade book club at the Silver Unicorn. I want to give a quick plug in case there are some young readers in our midst today, or any educators or parents who have readers between ages like 8 and 13 or so. We meet monthly. It's a free book club. We discuss great new middle grade books, which the kids get to help vote on and decide what we're going to read. And we also save some time at the end of our meetings, usually for some creative writing, which is a lot of fun. Most of our members are not just avid readers, but budding authors themselves, and I really want to encourage that. So we try to save time for some creative writing prompts. So just an invitation to you all to join us. It's free, it's really low pressure. It's just about fostering a love of literature and kind of creating a sense of community around books. Yeah, so that's that. In addition to reading a lot of middle grade, I also write middle grade. I'm the author of The Magic of Nellick Orchard, which came out in 2018, as well as Worst Case Colin, which is a contemporary middle grade novel in verse, and that's coming out this September with Charles Bridge. But tonight I get to talk about my latest book, Baby, which is Mission Multiverse. It's the first in a new sci-fi series that was published by Abrams Amulet just last week, which is exciting. And it follows a diverse cast of middle school bandmates who take a class field trip to NASA, where one of the characters' father works. And during their time there, they accidentally activate a quantum collider and are jettisoned into another dimension. And they find themselves on this place called Station Luminous, which is like an in-between megastructure that exists in the liminal space between these various dimensions. And there, their eyes are open to, you know, the sort of dazzling assortment of life forms and landscapes of the multiverse, which is exciting, but also a little overwhelming. And they also happen to learn that the fate of their own planet is in great peril. And if Earth is to destruct, then it will create this ripple effects throughout the entire multiverse. So it's not good. And they realize that the fate of not just their world, but the fate of many worlds rests in their well-intentioned but rather clumsy hands. So that's all I'll say about Mission Multiverse right now. I want to turn it over to these awesome panelists and hear a little bit about, give us a little bit of your background, and then tell us a little bit about your wonderful debuts. Let's see, Kaela, can we start with you?
Sure. So I'm a Latina, and I love writing about fantasy in general. This is my debut, CeCe Rios in the Desert of Souls, and it kind of came together for me when I started reconnecting with that part of my heritage, because I'm half Mexican and my mom is a British citizen, so ends up having a pretty multicultural experience, which I really enjoy, actually. So CeCe Rios in the Desert of Souls is about CeCe, the titular character. And she goes on an adventure in order to rescue her kidnapped sister from El Sombreron, who is also featured on the cover. If you can see him, he's kind of spooky, hanging out in the background. And on her journey, she has to make allies with criaturas, who are like these legendary animal and ghostly creatures who haunt the desert. On her journey, she has to make friends with them. She learns that the way that her people have treated them ends up being an experience she doesn't want to replicate by being a bruja. So she learns to create proper friendships and embrace her strengths that she was previously told were weaknesses. Like, she has a very soft, empathetic heart, and she's on this very, very dangerous adventure where her life and all of her friends are at risk constantly to save her family. So a lot of people keep telling her, no, you can't do that. You have to buck up, be stronger, be tougher, all these things. But it ends up being that the way that she does things may be the only way to save Juana, her older sister, after all.
That's a great description. We read, so I should just say we read Kaela's book for our last book club pick, and the kids really enjoyed it. And we had a really lively discussion about it. And we were all talking about, if we were a criatura, what would we be? And yeah, it spurred such interesting dialogue. So thanks for writing it and sharing with us.
Thanks for picking it. That makes me so happy.
Yeah, no, we're happy to. How about you, Sam? Tell us about Abby's adventures.
Yeah, so my book, let me grab a copy here. So my book is The Last Shadow Warrior, and it's based on Norse mythology. And I actually did a DNA test several years ago and discovered that I have about 20% Scandinavian. I think we just kind of get a lot of the mix of these guys invading these guys, invaded these guys, and you kind of all get stuff. So found that, as well as 5% Neanderthal, apparently, which I don't know what that's about. But anyway, did the Norse angle. So it's about a 12-year-old Viking in the modern world who has to save her school from these creatures out of Norse mythology. There's a ping pong playing sea monster, and there's a dark Valkyrie who's got her oven mitts of doom and things like that. So it's silly and fun and adventure. Still a lot like a Percy Jackson style, but I call it like Percy Jackson meets Beowulf, because I just love the story of Beowulf and wanted to update that, make it a modern story for today's kids. So that's where this came about.
I love that. It's such a fun read and such an interesting mashup. I have a question about that a little bit later, but just listening to you guys talk, I think one of the things that unifies all these stories is this, this idea of adventure, which is really timely right now, following a year of quarantine when we've all been stuck inside, and, many of us kind of craving that sense of escape, which books can offer in a safe way. I mean, I remember as a kid, and even now, books being this safe space to kind of confront your greatest fears or your worries, or maybe imagine, your biggest dreams coming true and what that might look like. And I think that all of these books are portals to new dimensions, whether or not the characters actually, rocket off into outer space, but they open up new worlds. And that sense of adventure is really important to nourish in childhood. So all of your characters, CeCe and Abby and the kind of the space cadets in my story, they're all going on various quests, which you guys kind of alluded to a little bit. And they rise to the occasion, I think, as only kids can. And they change and they grow during that process. Sam, what's the kind of overall quest that Abby goes on, and what does she learn, or how does she change over the course of that adventure?
Yeah, so I think in the very first scene, so she's like, the book opens with like this training scene. So she's been training as a Viking for a long time, and she's 12 now, and so she's got this axe that she's practicing with, and it's a wooden axe because she's not allowed to use the real stuff yet. But she really wants to show off her skills and stuff, and she gets a chance like at the very end of the first chapter. She's basically attacked in her house, and she fails, and she feels like she's a total failure. And so she kind of the story arc is she learns, what a hero is. The heroes come in many different shapes and sizes through the book, and she learns that she doesn't have to be, like this or that particular thing. She just has to be herself and ultimately conquer the bad guys and evil, I guess. But that's kind of the journey she goes with, from really wanting to, I think a lot of, in your stories too, the characters really want to be older, but they kind of cling to some stuff from when they're younger, but they're kind of in that space between, growing up and that tension there. So that's really what I kind of wanted to explore in this book. Yeah,
that's like crucial middle grade, right? The kind of the crux of what you just described, that kind of in betweenness, right? Between still being a little kid and being more independent.
Yeah, because that's like in your book. So the character that's got he always wears the same socks as his dad, but then he decides he's not going to wear the same socks. It's just little cool stuff like that. That's like, yeah, there's this changes going on where they want to kind of be their own person, and I think that's what I wanted to capture similar to.
Yeah, because your character has a family history, right? Her mom was a Viking, right? And so she's kind of forging her own identity within
Right.
that family structure.
Yeah, she's promised her mom that she's going to live up to this, legacy, but she's not sure if she can.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I saw CeCe, I mean, CeCe does the same, right? There's so many expectations heaped upon CeCe.
Mhm.
Kayla, can you give our viewers sort of like a snippet of her journey? Because she goes on quite an adventure, emotionally and physically.
Yeah. So CeCe, kind of what y'all are talking about with family connections and figuring out what you want to be, as well as loving your family dearly. I think that's a very central to CeCe's journey. So when she was a child, she met up with a criatura named CeCe. And I am pronouncing that a little bit wrong just for ease. But she, it's very kind to her. And even though it's a criatura and everybody in her town is like, no, we don't like criaturas. They're dangerous. They're scary. They will hurt you. So we have to out-mean them. We have to be scary and back. And they expect that of CeCe, but she ends up like rescuing Tsitsimil from them trying to attack her because she was kind to her. And that ends up following her and creates this really terrible reputation about the kind of person CeCe is. She's the weak link in the town. People don't believe her about things. They're a little scared of her in their own way because they're afraid that she's going to do something to get them killed. But she goes on that journey to save Juana when she's really internalized this idea that she's incapable, that she's weak, and she's wrong somehow about everything. But she goes on this journey to save Juana, and as she does, she starts to realize that her town is reacting out of pain and fear and things like that. So it's not like it's completely ununderstandable, but she also realizes that doesn't mean that's what she wants to be. She has this capacity to be very kind and get her sister back at the same time. So it really explores that idea of like, how do you protect the people you love without becoming the kind of person you hate, things like that. So that's kind of the emotional heart of the story. There is also like a huge fighting tournament where CeCe has to go with her allies, Coyote, Little Lion, Kit Fox, and things like that, and fight in the Bruja fights to prove that she's supposed to be able to go to Devil's Valley to save Juana, but she has to keep that secret. And she's not a secretive person normally, so it's also a little bit of a battle to project that sort of attitude that she's just not used to, and she's not that kind of person. So there's a lot of both physical and emotional risk in the story, and I enjoyed exploring all of that.
Yeah, it's interesting when you were talking, that very first scene where she helps, I think it's the first chapter where she helps the criatura, that endeared her to me. I mean, that made me really, connect with her as a character. And then you see the reaction of the town, and it's so very different than the reaction the reader has. But like you said, they're operating out of kind of pain and fear. And I thought that was very clever how you set up that opening to the story.
Well, thank you.
My
sisters didn't like it. They were really scared about it. They were like, oh, I can't believe the town was so mean to Tsitsimil. They were like so up in arms about it. They couldn't talk about anything else. It was really cute, actually.
And like similar too with that Coyote, the first time she meets Coyote, she actually gives him some bread, right? She doesn't know, who he is, but then it comes back around to her and actually helps her. So he actually owes her. And that's how they connect. I really like that, how you did that too. That was really neat.
Thank you. Yeah, I like the idea of I've always liked that in mythology, particularly when the character mentally earns their good ending, just by being a good person, didn't even know it was gonna pay off, and then the laws of nature reward them, kind of thing. I've always liked that.
Yeah, Sam, do you think you have any unexpected allies, like the way that Coyote becomes that for CeCe? Are there any unexpected allies, would you say, in your story?
Yeah, I don't know. So Abby moves to a totally new school. She doesn't know anybody except her dad, and her dad is in a coma through most of the book. So she has to basically collect all these kind of friends along the way. And I think it's just kind of one of the things that a lot of kids have had to deal with is making new friends. Yours definitely deals with this, Rebecca. A lot of the friendship relationships in the book as well. But she just kind of has to figure out how to work together with people she doesn't know, and they kind of build the bonds as they go, just by being who she is. And she doesn't have to try to, be somebody she's not, because she's really isn't. That's not her personality. That she can like fake it and
just kind of like this levity and some humor, and I like the balance of those two characters.
Yeah, he's kind of the straight, or she's kind of the straight man to him, I think, a lot. But I think that yeah, I really always like the characters like that are. So he seems pretty kind of like goofy and stuff, but he's really a pretty smart guy. He helps her in a lot of the challenges that they deal with. He's kind of the brains that figures out, this is how we're going to solve this, kind of thing. So yeah, he's really smart.
I love those kinds of friendships between like the humorous one, but secretly they're like really capable, and like the straight man, like, because that really, it shows, I think it shows kids and shows all of us and reminds us that we kind of need each other's balances in order to create like a cohesive whole. I think y'all's books do a really good job of that too.
Yeah,
I was impressed with. Sorry,
go
ahead.
I
was impressed with both of your books. Like, you guys have like tons of characters, and the way that you actually managed to balance all those characters, give them all arcs, it was just like, whoa. Impressive. So I mean, Rebecca, with you got like 5 main characters, is that right?
Yeah, and then too many secondary characters. It's like a lot of head hopping. My publisher and I have this huge like spreadsheet basically we created in copy edits to make sure that everything was consistent, even with all the secondary characters who come from all these dimensions, and then they look a certain way, and some days I'm like, wait, who's talking now? Who's the, it's a lot to juggle. But yeah, it's interesting what you were saying about, kind of the arcs of individual characters versus kind of like a group arc. And that's definitely something that I had to navigate in this story, is making sure that like all of the 5 main characters had their own unique emotional arc, and kind of grew and changed, but also that the cadets as kind of a unit, as an ensemble, had certain kind of revelations together, right? Because they're working as a team for the most part. And I think one of the things that they learn is that some of the parts of them that they were embarrassed about, or that they felt made them weird, right? Like they're these band geeks back on Earth that are kind of teased relentlessly, and they're really nerdy, but thrown into this new situation, those become their greatest assets, right? Those things that make them weird and unique are, actually save their lives. Like at one point, their ability to play earthling music, saves them. So I think that kind of process of self-discovery and like self-acceptance that you guys were talking about a little bit is important, and also in writing a series, you want the arcs to tie up in a satisfying way, but you don't want them to tie up so tightly that you can't continue on. So there's a lot of like those to be continued threads, that the characters are going to continue to grow and change and and evolve as the series progresses.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to be right back. My Alexa just started playing Christmas music randomly, so if you hear Christmas music, I don't know what happened. I must have said something that sounded like Alexa, so I'll be right back.
I'll ask you a question while you go.
That's hilarious.
Well, Kaela, I saw a post that you put up earlier today, actually, which got me thinking. And you said something about the fact that adventure kind of led you to writing. And like in the early days of becoming an author, that sense of adventure like played a role. So was your path to publication, what did it look like? Was it long and winding? Was it short and sweet?
It is kind of a fun story. I guess it's both long and winding and short and sweet. Okay. So I started writing at like 10, that's when I finished my first novel. It was terrible and I loved it. And then at 14 is like when I got serious. I was like, yeah, I want to really do this. And so for years, it was about 10 years actually before I got an agent. I wrote book after book after book. I think CeCe is the 10th book I've written, like finished. So obviously it was
a YA before it was middle grade, you said earlier before we started, right?
Yeah, it was YA originally too. So it's like a wild adventure now. Yeah. And then once I finally got my agent towards the end of 2017, like suddenly everything kind of sped up a little bit, like faster than I expected it to, because we went out like the next year. And then within 6 months of going on sub, and we suddenly got an offer, and then I had to revise it to middle grade. But by the end of the year we had the offer, and then by the beginning of the next year we had the contract signed and could like announce it and everything. So like it was like really long and winding, tons of books written, and then all of a sudden I was like, whoa, all of it.
Yeah, I think publishing has only 2 speeds, like glacially slow or breakneck fast. And if there's nothing in between, there's nothing in between.
Like we don't do good pacing here, just in the books.
Exactly. And Rebecca, you've got 2 books this year. How did you manage the?
Yeah, that wasn't meant to be. My first book, this book took about 5 years from like seedling idea to finished, like published book. But I had 2 babies in the middle of that, and I was transitioning careers, and there was a lot going on. But while that was kind of in progress, I sold this book in a 2-book deal, and I thought that would be my second and third books. But then somewhere along the way, this guy popped up and happened, like I was saying, at the other pace of publishing, which is like the warp speed. And the first draft of this was written, in just a couple months, and then, kind of rocketed onto the shelf at a much faster pace than even I was prepared for.
Wow.
So it's just, it's funny. It's challenging in different ways, and it makes you be kind of nimble and creative, and it gets my mind working in different ways, and playing with different genres. But it was a strange path to come here, but I'm just embracing the ride. I'm just grateful that I get to do this job. I mean, I think writing books for kids is probably the best job in the world. I know I'm biased, but I hope it's something I can continue to do and get more books in the pipeline, and chat with wonderful people like you.
Totally. Yeah. And it's interesting.
How about you, Sam? What was your path?
Ask me another question. So just similar. Sure. I think a lot of authors talk about kind of staying in your lane, like writing one genre. So you've obviously jumped to 3 different genres, I guess, at this point. So
basically the textbook of what you're not supposed to do. Yeah.
So don't do this at home. Yeah.
Yeah. I write what kind of sparks my passion. I mean, otherwise it's hard to be motivated to do that. And, I thought it was really interesting this past year at the ALA Awards. Christina Suntornbot, who's an author I really, really admire. She had 2 Newbery Honor books. One was a nonfiction, about the Thai boys soccer team rescue. And then another one was this Thai-inspired fantasy, which are so different, in so many ways, but she did them both so beautifully. And she talked about in an interview, feeling like for so long in her, past careers that having various interests was kind of a shortcoming. It was like she was a scatterbrain or whatever. And I felt that way my whole life. I'm, a dancer turned an architect turned now a writer, and like all these different iterations of myself. But I feel like as a writer, you can combine all those interests and follow those passions in different ways. So yeah, I totally encourage people to experiment outside of genres and, write, like, it sounds like Kaela, you write YA and middle grade, and Sam, I don't know if you write other genres and age groups as well, but I say, why not?
My first books I wrote, kids books, were picture books. And so I started there and then kind of moved up along with my kids. So my kids were just kind of getting into the middle grade area. But I've got the first book here is fantasy, but I've also got a horror I'm working on, and there's a sci-fi that I'm interested in. So I'm like you, I kind of feel like a little bit of a scatterbrain. But Kaela, with your 10 books, are those all fantasy, or were those kind of all over the place? Or?
They were pretty all over the place too. There was a sci-fi, there was a dystopian, there was lots of fantasies, but there was also a contemporary. So yeah, scatterbrain, but at the same time, that's the best part about writing. You get to like really flex in on all the different things you want to be and like pull them in. Like, I want to be an astronomist, so this book's going to be about stars.
That's cool. Yeah.
Stuff like that.
And I think if you have a supportive agent, especially, both of my agents that I've had so far have been really encouraging of trying new things. And one of their rationale was, you'll just connect with a different reader base. And so that's how I try to think of it, as opposed to like, oh, I'm all over the place, like, oh, I'm appealing to a broad range, so it's kind of interesting. Exactly. Well, speaking of kind of like collective, inspiration from all over, I think you guys have some of the most fascinating comp titles. If people don't know what comps are, it's like comparative or comparison titles. It's a way that publishers help position a book in the market so that readers can have a sense of what it's all about. So I've seen CeCe called A New Narnia Full of Desert and Danger, as well as Pokemon Meets Coco, which, I mean, that's like all over the place, but it works. And The Last Shadow Warrior has been called, you mentioned, like a retelling of Beowulf, a la Percy Jackson meets Thor. So how did you guys blend those seemingly disparate things into these cohesive, beautiful, creative stories?
I want to hear from Sam first. I'm like so interested because I love that idea. Like when I heard your comp, I was like, boo, I want to go, I want to read.
Well, and I was like, oh, I want to reach out to this guy. That sounds so interesting.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, I was an English major in college. So I did all the we did the medieval literature and things like that. So I did the Beowulf and Canterbury Tales and all those. I just loved reading that and read them in the original Old English. And so I just got really into it and loved it. But I know a lot of kids don't know what Beowulf is, because there have been some movies, but I think not recently, of Beowulf. So that's why we kind of use the alternating, like the Thor, because all the kids know what the Thor Marvel Universe stuff is. So it's Thor meets Percy Jackson, or it's Beowulf meets Percy Jackson, depending on who it is. But it just was really, I just saw kind of an obvious, I guess, connection, because there's 3 bad guys in Beowulf, and so I kind of saw it from the start as like this arc of a trilogy basically, where it plays out, where he fights the Grendel in the first book, and then there's Mama Grendel in the second book, and then the third one is a dragon. So it's he was one of the original dragon slayers of English literature. So but I just love the mashup, aspect of taking something old and then new and smashing them together and seeing what you get. So that's what you get, I guess, with a lot of my book, because you've got the sea monster who's playing ping pong, and then you've got a Valkyrie with these oven mitts, and she's making snickerdoodles, and also she wants to steal your soul, by the way. So that's what I think makes it fun for middle grade, because you can just do all kinds of stuff, and kids are just like, yeah, I love this, whereas adults are more like, I'm not sure if that works. So I just love kids' imaginations. They really open to a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and I think you make those kind of older, like classics, like Beowulf is a little bit dusty, but you make it so accessible and interesting, and I think it might lead to older readers wanting to then check out the source material too. You never know what kind of literature treasure hunt they'll go on after the spark of interest from your book. So maybe it will.
I hope so. Yeah, there's even a comic book version of Beowulf that I saw on my website. I've got like different levels of Beowulf for different readers. So you've got the comic book version, and then there's like a picture book, and I based a lot of mine on Tolkien's version of Beowulf, which he used for his research for Lord of the Rings and things like that. So he's really influenced by Beowulf and the original legends. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff you can dig into there for kids who are interested. Yeah.
I like what you said about the mixture of the new and old, particularly because you get that from like the very first scene. I mean, she's doing her training exercises, throwing the axe around, and then like it zooms out a little to like just show you the room, when you describe the room. And I got that sense immediately because of the way that she exists in it with the language. So, she's so 12, you can feel it, but then she's surrounded by all like this medieval gear and these training dummies, and they're talking. And I was like, I know where I am immediately. I loved that.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. And I think so one of the things
I would say
one of the things we've talked about among our authors group is just, influences or where you get inspiration from. And one of the things a lot of us said is just asking questions like what if kind of scenarios to see what works. And so I think that's kind of one of the things that sparked this is reading about Vikings. And so they were on the world stage for like 300 years, and then they just disappeared. And so that kind of, for me, sparked to like, well, what actually happened? And, what if they actually still were around? And so that's kind of where Abby comes from. She's this line of secret Vikings that are secretly kind of behind the scenes on the world stage still. So that was really kind of just fascinating for me.
I like that. What if? Yeah, that's really good. Kaela, what about yours? Yours is such an interesting blend of folklore and history and myth. How did you come to all of that? Is that part of stories that you grew up with, or those research that you did on your own?
A mixture of both of those, yeah. Because a lot of it was inspired by listening to my abuelo tell stories about growing up in northern Mexico, which is something I had never heard before I went to stay with him for a couple weeks during a Christmas break in college. And hearing him tell the stories, I was like, this is so cool. Why does nobody know about this? Why didn't I know about this anyway? And hearing stories about like his father, like trekking between mountains at nighttime with only the moonlight to see by a waterway, trying to not get caught by La Llorona as he's going. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I wanted to capture that feeling that like persists throughout all of his stories, the way, like the flavor of the desert. And at the same time, because I'm me and I loved anime growing up, I loved Pokemon. I did not intentionally be like Pokemon, but I wanted to bring in that sort of, there's this huge thing about danger and knowing that all times that you could die in Mexican like folklore and stories and stuff, this concept that nature could at any time just take you out. You know, it could happen, you know, and you're like, okay. So like this really close relationship with danger and death and stuff like that. So I really wanted to bring that in. And one of the ways that I love to experience that, and I feel like it's a little bit safer to experience it in a story, you know, especially the age group that I'm writing for, was like a fighting tournament. So I was like, yeah. And then that connected to something that a what if, like Sam said, that I'd been asking myself for years and trying to get in a story for years, which was, what if we had our souls on the outside? Like, how would that influence?
Detail, yeah, with the soul stone, yeah.
Yeah, like how would that influence the way that we interacted with each other, especially in a world where there was this kind of presence of danger constantly. And you're like the way that affects relationships in every single way.
And
so
control someone else's soul too, which happens in your book, which is interesting.
Yes, exactly. So like the whole bruja fights are kind of based around that concept of exploring power and fear and death. I mean, I'm saying death a lot, but I actually try to avoid saying the word death and kill and stuff like that in the book a lot. So it's not as scary as it sounds.
Lives too. So, you know, if there's young readers, it's, you know, they're kind of like cats with 9 lives, right? They're not completely kaput.
Yeah, they'll come back.
You totally get that in the book. They got the velvet rope, and you can't go across the velvet rope, or that's where, you know, there's a very clear distinction about where the bad starts. It's pretty cool how you have that delineation of the worlds like that.
Yeah, like the ruins, because like, I mean, you know, even that's a presence throughout mythology, really. Like even in Celtic folklore, there's the idea of like the will-o'-the-wisps. We create all these things to like keep you where it's safe. Don't go into the woods. The big bad wolf will get you, you know, all kinds of things like that across the world. But I wanted to bring that sense of danger in close, because this is a world where it is, because some people's souls are on the outside, and you know, the criaturas are stronger than human beings, and like, how do we handle that relationship with being afraid and, you know, managing being the kind of good people we want to be, that kind of idea. So yeah, I thought I just brought together all the things that I liked, and I tried to make sure that they weaved together thematically well. You know, like I pruned a few things out that I was like, okay, that doesn't actually make sense in the story anymore. I actually can't remember which ones they were, but there were a few. Yeah. I was like, that's just, I want it, and there's no better reason, so I'll take that one out.
I like that you added some back matter at the end of your book. You have a glossary, and then you give us some of the context of some of those, you know, the roots of some of those myths or characters. And I know the book club kids really enjoyed that, because it was just like an extra thing. You know, we talk about back matter a lot in picture books, but like, I think it can really add to, you know, middle grade fiction as well. So
yeah, well, I remember there were all kinds of like mythology. I loved mythology books growing up, you know, from everywhere. And I loved when I found out more context about everything, especially when I read a book and I was like, I want to know more about that creature I've never heard of. Is that like a thing? And I'd have to go hunt it down before the internet, you know. I'd have to like go find an obscure book in the library and be like, come on, be in here. And so I wanted to make that a little bit more accessible, especially for people who weren't as familiar with it. So everybody gets to enjoy the full context.
Exactly. Well, I can't believe we're like speeding toward the end. It seems like it just like went by in a blink. But one question I always like to ask is, you know, well, in pre-pandemic times, like if we were to be doing in-person school visits or library visits, you know, what is something that you would tell students or educators, or what is, you know, one thing that you hope readers take away after reading your story? Sam, do you want to start?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit earlier, just the aspect of, so Abby learns through the story that heroes come in different shapes and sizes, and she doesn't have to be like this person or that person. She just has to be herself, and that's enough. Yeah. So there's kind of that underlying thread, but I think just overall, when I talk to kids about the book, I just really want them to get the sense that it's fun, and just the reading should be fun. And I hope that they have, you know, they laugh and they are kind of transported away from, you know, whatever they're dealing with for a little while they're reading it. So that's just not, you know, particularly deep, but I think that I really love reading, and this is what I would have read when I was that age. So I hope that they have the same.
I think we all write for our younger selves, you know, to a certain extent. I know I do.
Right. Yeah. Like Kaela said, she's writing an anime accidentally because, you know, you're influenced by all your, you know, everything you've, you know, consumed before, and you don't even know sometimes that you're writing and you look back on it like, wow, I did that. Okay.
I made a tournament arc. What?
Exactly. Yeah.
How about you, Kaela? Is there one kind of nugget of wisdom or a takeaway that you'd like readers to think about?
I'd say that there are several, but I will say that there's one big one, and it's similar to Sam's. I'd say that I really want people to learn to embrace their own strengths, because a lot of times we mislabel our own strengths. Other people may mislabel them, and sometimes we mislabel them ourselves, where we think, oh, this is a huge weakness. I need to change. I need to be this. I need to be that, and not realize that there is a way to step into your strengths that will make both you and the world a better place. Especially in your sphere of influence, that you can grow and thrive, and it will significantly nourish you and others around you if you embrace all of that best of yourself. Like, respect and embrace those strengths inside of yourself, as well as respect and embrace the strengths of others. I think that's also really important, because we all come in, like Sam said, we all come in different shapes and sizes, but there are heroes inside all of us, and it just takes a little patience sometimes to see where they are.
I love that. And I think I would echo a very similar sentiment. For myself, I think, I often remark that I think 11-year-olds we should let 11-year-olds run the world, because they're, or, just kids in general, but that age in particular, I just think they're at like peak, smarts and creativity, and they're so resourceful and empathetic. And, I wanted to write a story about kids saving the world, because I have so much hope and optimism about this next generation. And I think who better to save the world than kids? And I want to write stories that empower children to think about themselves as the heroes, like you were saying, and to think about kind of acts, big and small, that could have positive effects, not, maybe within their school or their community, or, maybe on a global scale. So I think that's kind of a common takeaway for all of ours to an extent. And I think we're ready for Kira to join us. That just went by so fast.
Ooh,
yeah.
It really did. I knew it would. It's just like, it's not fair how fast an hour can be. This has been fantastic. It's been fantastic. Just really quick, folks, again, you've been using the chat so very well. This is your chance. If you have questions, and I know there are questions in the Q&A, if you have questions, this is your time to put them in the Q&A, so that way we don't have to shift through the chat and we can find them. We can just go through this efficiently. Though I'm gonna get the first question, because that's what happens when you're the hostess. Kaela, yes to the anime, so you're gonna have to shout out what the animes, like what your favorite influential anime has been, and then we'll just cross-check to see whether or not they're the cool franchises. I just have to know.
Okay, My Hero Academia is my latest one. I love that one. Demon Slayer is also really good. I don't necessarily recommend that for like really young kids, but maybe not that one. But My Hero Academia, so good. Like when I watched it, I was like, Deku is CeCe. So it made me so happy.
Yes.
And I grew up on Inuyasha. I grew up on Yu Yu Hakusho, which tournament arc. I was like, oh, I put a tournament arc in CeCe because I love Yu Yu Hakusho. Lots of others. Sailor Moon, of course, obviously. Yeah. Most magical girl anime. I was like, yes, give me the sparkles and the kicking butt.
Yes.
I like that intersection.
Sparkle. It's so good. It's so good. I always have a moon on me because of Sailor Moon. Like Sailor Moon is my magical girl. Yes. I'm so excited. But just like
makes about you, Kira. I didn't know that.
Yes, I always have a moon on me. I always have a moon on me for Sailor Moon. Always.
That's perfect. I love that.
Okay, let's get started on real things. Kaela, I'm gonna be emailing you afterwards about all things anime all the time.
You do.
So Joy wants to know, when you plot your stories, this is for all three of y'all, are you planners, or are you pantsers, or are you the infamous plantsers? I just added that one. Joy wants to know if you're planners or pantsers.
I'm a pantser. I'll come out and admit it. Yeah. I am working on becoming a plantser, but I'm definitely a full-on pantser. Like I write out of order even. CeCe was written completely out of order, like jumped straight to like her meeting Coyote, then back to the first chapter, then like all the way out of order. Like my first draft is all about pulling the scenes together so they actually read cohesively, you know. So full pantser, but it's because I love the adventure of discovering the world, you know, out of absolutely nothing. I'm like, I'm just gonna step into this room and see what's here.
Yeah, I love that sense of discovery. I find I'm a hybrid. If I know too much about the story, I tend to get bored, and I kind of like those serendipitous moments when a character walks onto the page and you're like, oh, hello, you know, who are you? And then they're, you know, pivotal to the story. But I will say, and you know, and to your point about Kaela, about writing out of order, when I write verse, which is this one, so written in a series of poems, I write that completely out of order. And then I, you know, patch it together like a giant quilt. So that's a very different experience. But I will say that this one was heavily outlined because it was on a very tight schedule. I've mentioned to these guys before, it was written in, like the first draft was written under 3 months and kind of went at this like incredible warp speed. So in order to write that fast, I really need to know where the story is going. I would like to get more toward being an outliner just so I can, you know, write and publish more stories. But sometimes, you know, I think every book demands a different process. So I'm a hybrid. How about you, Sam?
Yeah, and same for me. I mean, to what you said about the being able to write faster as a parent and a full-time working and parent, you just don't have that much time to write. So you need to be able to write as efficiently as possible. So it helps me to have kind of an idea of where I'm going and have an outline to follow, or else it just kind of, you know, it might be a week or 2 weeks between times that I write. And if I completely forgot what I was writing before and have to reread everything, I can't get it done. So I just have to have a plan outline to do what I'm doing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, keeping that momentum is tricky. I know what you mean. If there's like these lulls, you know, I think writing as a parent, especially of small children, you have to train yourself to write between interruptions, which are constant, at least. Yeah. And so and just kind of adapting your process to that. I mean, I wrote most of my other book in the front seat of my car, you know, just like little poems jotted down here and there. So you just have to be flexible. And
that's why I admire parent writers. I'm like, yo, it's already hard, you know, for me. And hearing about your kids, you know, you're keeping a human being alive. That's really important. And then you're also writing. I'm like, major props.
Yeah, she just did a new term called parentser, where you actually put the kids to bed and then you write like your hair's on fire until you fall asleep.
I love that. I'm going to borrow that. I'll credit you, but I think that
that's fantastic.
That's genius, because it's so true. That is so true. That's awesome. Yes, Samantha concurs. Yes, that's phenomenal. I'm going to use that. That's awesome. All right, so Deborah wants to know, do you all ask writer friends to read your first drafts?
So I'm in like 5 different critique groups that I've been a little neglectful of lately because I've been so busy with this deadline, but they all kind of serve different purposes, and we all, you know, they all have different group dynamics. I have kind of 3 really close critique partners that I will swap what I call my word salad with. I mean, that's like the messiest draft, which I would be embarrassed to show anyone else. And I do show them to that. I do show those pages to that very small, kind of trusted, very kind group. And they give me the tough love, but it's, you know, it's all in good fun and, you know, helping me go toward a better end product. So I will with that group. And then I like to share more polished things with my other groups because you're looking for different feedback at different points. But how about you guys? What's your community of writer friends look like?
What about you, Kaela?
Well, I have one writers group. I know, like, I have other like critique groups online, as in like we bonded over pitch wars and, you know, stuff like that. But most of my writing I pass by my writers group now. But also I have people in it who I give them it at different times, really. Like one, I'm like, hi, I think this is almost good, but there's something missing. You're the one who knows when something's missing. Tell me what it is. And then I have, my mom is actually like, she's not in that group, but she's in that timeline, you know, like when I'm like, okay, everything's pretty clean, but it's now line level. And it's the kind of line level I don't want to send it to my editor yet or anyone else yet. So tell me what's wrong, because she's so good at spotting. She's like, this is confusing. I know that if my mom can read it without being like, what's happening, anyone can read it and know what's happening. So it's really perfect. I have other people who I'm like, hi, this is super messy. Can you give me a high level, like what needs to change, please? I've been with this too long and no longer have perspective. So different key people throughout the process kind of thing. I find that's really helpful because knowing their strengths, it helps because I can lean into their strengths. Be like, hi, you're the one who knows when something's wrong. Please tell me. I know there is. So that's what I do.
Yeah, for me, that I don't let anybody look at my first draft until I'm like completely done. I just can't. I don't want to be like, I guess, discouraged. Like if I'm really excited about an idea, I don't want anybody to say before I'm done, and I want to finish it and get it out there. So, but I actually had for this book, I had my son's 5th grade class read the first draft when it was completely done, and they gave me feedback, and so it was really cool to have kids giving, because kids will just tell you exactly what they think about it. And it was neat to just get that feedback. And so my son always kind of is one of my first readers too, but I'm in a couple other groups that we kind of beta read the entire book. We were doing kind of like a chapter at a time, but I feel like you can't get the flavor of the whole book.
Yeah,
that's read a chapter
for books, but I find for novels, I need to swap large chunks, especially if you're trying to work out major kind of plot holes or plot arcs.
Yeah, I have to give it like the whole thing, to each person in the process, because otherwise I'm like, listen, this sounds crazy in this chapter, but in the context, I know you'll like it. Okay, that's not the real problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's so great. This is great. I'm learning a lot because I think you're right about giving those big chunks instead of the smaller bits, which I sometimes do like chapter to chapter. And I don't think that's always helpful, but that's really important to know.
Although I will say, I think in terms of if you're going to share a small chunk of a novel, the best small chunk to share is like the first chapter or even like the first 5 pages, because those are critical, right? For like hooking the reader, the opening paragraphs, that I think you could workshop in a smaller, isolated group of pages and get some really meaningful feedback on. So that would be my only exception to that rule about full manuscript swaps.
Yeah, and what I found too is that when you share like a chapter, or the feedback is really always heavy, like right in the first several paragraphs, and then it kind of thins out as they kind of get into it. Cause you kind of feel the reader kind of struggling to get into the story, right? And so they're giving you a lot of feedback, and then it peters out a little bit. So you kind of have to take it as a grain of salt, I think, as your the heavy feedback up front. It's not really as bad as the red might make it look, but
that is really important. So I'm going to interlude before I ask Susan's question, which is, how long did you spend on those first 20 pages? Like, how many times did you go back? How much time did you spend on those? Like, just for each of these 3 books, how much of your energy do you think you put into that first chapter?
Hard, probably more than I should have. I don't know. I knew the first line right away, and that didn't change. But for me, writing this book too, I needed to get to know the characters. Like, that's also, like we were talking about the discovery process. I spend a lot of time on that first chunk because I need to like, it's like meeting these characters. Sometimes they're fully formed in your brain, but sometimes they're not, and you kind of have to like get to know them and put them in different situations, and also figure out the pacing. And so I tinker with it a lot, and then I'll keep writing forward, and then I'll go back and like obsess over things and keep writing forward and go back. So I don't know. What do you guys do?
Yeah, Kaela, it sounds like you write out of order. So you maybe you didn't write the first chapter first.
That's true. I actually, although I think actually with CeCe, I did write the first chapter first, but it's not the first chapter anymore. It's now the second chapter. So I during one of the revisions, I had to go back because people were like, I don't understand why the town hates CeCe. And I was like, actually, that's really important. You're right. Let me go back. So I always end up having to start earlier than I think I do, because I start in right here. We're at Noche de Muerte. You're about to see it go down, and then people are like, context. I'm like, good call.
That's interesting. I often hear the opposite advice, at writing workshops. They say get rid of your prologue, get rid of, start where the story starts, start where the action starts. But you're right, in order for the readers to feel invested in the character, which I think you do so well with CeCe. Like I said, she, you feel like really connected to her and you empathize with her at the beginning, but you need a little bit of that backstory without dragging it out.
Yeah, no, I think it is actually really important because, I mean, if you look at the hero's journey, it's meeting them in their normal world first, so that you have context as to who they were before everything started happening. Because otherwise, you're like, I don't know if this person's even changing. I don't know what they care about even,
That's the big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So going back and I had to go write the first chapter, after I'd finished the whole book, and then I was like, oh yeah, okay, first chapter, we're going back there. I didn't actually end up working on that one too much, like, line editing, making sure like, oh yeah, let's put that little world building piece in, let's, tweaking level. But the second one did change a lot because it was no longer the first chapter anyway. And then because it was originally a young adult, and then I made it middle grade. And so that changed sort of the stakes that I had been setting up before.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a whole scene where Juana and CeCe danced in the town square together. And then CeCe got embarrassed because nobody wanted to dance with her and things like that. And then she ended up wandering off. And then I decided I didn't want it to be about like a boy not wanting to dance with her. I was like, no, that's not really even the core of this. It was an example, but not the core. So I ended up changing that a lot. Plus I needed her to get to the outside ruins faster. So that one ended up changing a lot. And I probably spent the most time on that one, setting up everything. So tweaking all of that. Yeah, I don't know how long it took on it, but let's just say it was probably up there on the chapters that required the most revision. Up there with the climax. That one also took a lot. Which kind of makes sense because they're the two ends of the story. So they required the most collaboration to make sure that both make sense together. Like once you get here, you're like, yes, everything was setting up here.
Yeah.
Now is satisfying.
Those anchor points in a story, right? And then you can build off of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
How about you, Sam?
I changed my first 20 pages so many times I don't even know. I felt like I was like as a novice writer, I just kind of kept running into all the tropes. Like I initially started out, she's waking up, and somebody said, no, you can't start a novel where they're waking up. And then I moved it, she was in his car. I'm like, you can't start about she's in the car. I'm like, what do I do? So I kept changing it, and it's a new scene. So now she's in a battle scene when she opens up, and I guess you can do that now. Yeah, I felt like I was just kind of stumbling through the first several, because this is my first time I've written a book of this length. I mentioned I've written picture books and chapter books, but just kind of having the concentration and focus to be able to write 70,000 words for the first time was tough for sure. So lots of change.
Got it. Yeah.
How would you approach your next one, Sam? Like, given everything that you've learned, like, would you approach it differently?
Well, it's funny because so this one was really a struggle, and then the second one I feel like, so I've actually written the second in the series already, and that one felt like it just kind of poured out of me. It was weird, like totally different experience. And I don't know if that means it's better, like when you write and it pours out, that
I think that's generally a good sign. I mean, I think that's like the closest feeling to like euphoria, when you that, kind of creative waterfall.
I know exactly what I want.
Yeah. It's almost like the story is just like, you're just a conduit for the story, which is really enjoyable.
That feeling.
It's
like you're watching it and just writing it down. You're like, okay, I'm recording.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then Jason Reynolds says that when he struggles with his writing, that's how he knows when it's good, because when he really struggles with it, it's his best work. So I don't know, different for everybody, I imagine.
I'm going to keep that in mind when I'm struggling next time.
Yes, indeed. Right. Yeah. If Jason's struggling, then may we all. Holy Lordy. Right. Wow. All right, our last question comes from Susan. Hey, Susan. Susan says, I'm curious about how you three connected with each other. Forgive me if you've already said that. I missed that.
No, we didn't. Well, so I'm like very much into middle grade of all sorts and kind of follow it, not just for the book club, but just because I love it and I write it. And both of these debut authors kind of were on my radar, and I was, kind of eyeing their books when they came out, wanting to read them, and noticing, reading the descriptions, that we all shared kind of some common themes. And I didn't want to do a traditional like book launch for Mission Multiverse, but I thought it's been a tough year to debut. And, why not kind of team up and spread the book love and just have a fun, interesting chat and reach out to people. I think I just reached out to you on Twitter, just kind of like a cold call, and was like, hey, your books look awesome. Do you want to do something with me? So I hope you don't think I was a creeper, but there's such a nice like kidlit community I find online, and I'm really not one for social media, but that's been one of the upsides of, you know, sites like Twitter and to a certain extent Instagram, is just to build community and connect with other like-minded authors and kidlit enthusiasts.
And I'm glad you did. I mean, we the three of us have never met before this call, so it's, I mean, I feel like we could keep talking for hours about this topic.
I know.
So.
I want to meet you now, both of you. I gotta get you to sign my copies or get a book plate from the Silver Unicorn.
Exactly.
Ditto. Yes, no, I was really glad you did. Thank you. Because that's why I was like, this is why I'm not off Twitter. It's for these opportunities to like connect with people and like hang out and, you know, just be like, oh, these are great books and great people and all of that. So I was really, really grateful. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Kira and Silver Unicorn.
Absolutely.
Is that the end of our Q&A? I think we're right.
Yeah, and we're just a little past 8. We did good, y'all. This was great. I'm so glad that you reminded me that we're with 2 debut authors. It's just so perfect. Just as we wrap up, y'all. Are there any other just last thoughts that you have? Any shout outs, any thank yous that you want to give before we say goodbye?
Shout out again to Rebecca for bringing us together.
Oh, thank you.
Because this is so fun.
Thank you guys for joining.
I really, really enjoyed this. And, you know, now I've seen Sam Subity in like, I don't know, video call person. I was going to say in person, then I was like, we're not. So, but you know, and that's really fun because we've been in the debut group together, kind of circling around each other in the middle grade circles. Now we know Rebecca and the Silver Unicorn, which I was like, the moment you were like the Silver Unicorn, I was like, that's the best name for a bookstore I've ever heard.
Yeah.
So yeah, shout out to you again. Thank you. And Kira and the Silver Unicorn for having autographed books of our books out there and everything too. I love the indie bookstore community. So I'll stop myself there. I'm talkative.
To end on, I think.
Yes. Any other thoughts, Sam, Rebecca?
No, the only other thing I'll shout out is our next book club for the middle grade book club. Our next selection is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. So anybody would like to join us, we're going to be chatting about another great middle grade book next month. So yeah, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you both. Congratulations on your debuts. I can't wait to read I didn't even get to ask you about what you're working on next, but we'll have to do another panel just to chat about upcoming stuff. But yeah, thank you all so much.
Yeah, whatever it is, bring it to the Silver Unicorn. We want to host you. Please come back and see us because you're awesome. That's the thing. So for y'all still with us, because this has been an extended edition of our event this evening, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for sticking around. Second of all, the Silver Unicorn is open. Come see us, be one of our 7 people in the store. Come pick up these 3 gorgeous books. So CeCe, Mission Multiverse, The Last Shadow Warrior, come get these books. We have signed copies. We have book plates. We have these available. So come get them in the store or get them at silverunicornbooks.com. And if you want a personalized copy, then put that in the comments and we'll make sure that you get a signed copy. Come back and see us. Stay safe out there. For those of y'all who are friends and fans of the Silver Unicorn, we still have events going on for the rest of the month and into next month. So come see us. If you have younger readers, we have our middle grade book club hosted by the intrepid Rebecca Caprara. So just send me an email, events@silverunicornbooks.com, so that you can get the URL for next month's book club. And I think that's it. I think I got it I got all of it. Thank you so much for being with us. Kaela and Sam, you're amazing. Congratulations. Can't wait to read more of your work. Rebecca, we get to celebrate your next publication.
Yeah, the launch of this.
Wow.
Yeah.
DVD in September.
Yeah, in September, we will see you. We get to do this again, hopefully in person. So, but maybe even a hybrid thing. So if you're far away, we might still be able to Zoom you in. Haha, pun intended. Okay. It's been a pleasure. Everyone stay safe out there and we will see you again really soon. And don't forget that if you're far away, pick up these 3 books at an independent bookstore near you. Good night, everyone.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. Bye.